Welcome everyone to Couch Potato Diary. Happy Monday. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in today. We are live, of course, twitch.tv/primetimepk. So thank you to people watching live. Shout out Toxic already in the chat saying hello. Great to chat with Toxic as always as we come off of another very busy NFL Sunday. We'll do that. Couple quick thoughts on the CFL. Missed it last week, so want to go over some of the Shohei Ohtani stuff this week. Also, what else do we have? Oh, we got some NHL previews continuing as well, as we look at teams that I think are going to be out of the playoffs from who were in it are now out, and now who were out and now in. It'll make sense when we do it. And for Flames talk, we'll wrap up the show today looking at some X factors for the season and a couple players that might fall off from what we saw last year. And of course, a busy weekend in boxing again. We have a gigantic upset in the sport, so we will talk about all of that as the show rolls along. So thank you guys all so much for tuning in today. Let's get right into the football talk. I'm worried that I am the slightest bit out of sync. So if those in the chat who are watching could let me know, that would be fantastic. But we will begin with just kind of bounce around the whole NFL schedule here. And again, this will be one of the last weeks where we go over every single game. Because I don't know if we need to go through all, 13 games that we had yesterday. Although it was a bit easier to manage than we didn't have the 10 and the whatever this week. We just had, we had a bit easier to handle 7. Okay, thanks, Toxic. Very little. I don't know if I'll be able to change that on the fly. That's a little bit annoying because it seemed to work well last week and I have not changed anything on my end. But anyway, so yes, apologies if we are a touch out of sync here this week. Okay, so we will begin with the Baltimore Ravens, who get a much-needed win over the Dallas Cowboys, but not in as convincing fashion as you would like. Some questions very much still remain about this team, and quite frankly, that shouldn't have been that difficult. I believe it was 28-6 that they had the lead on at one point, and then they took their foot off the gas, which I get. Teams do all the time. And it is tough to flip that switch back on once you have flipped it off. But still, this should not have been as difficult as it was. This was a real problem for the Ravens that, like, once they had to wake up and make plays again, they just couldn't. It was very challenging for them to get a couple of first downs and string anything together, and it just let the Cowboys continue to get back into this game. And like I had said after their opener that it was a good performance and a win. And like they lost, but you feel pretty good about it. This one, they won. You feel kind of bad about it based off of how the back part of that closes. First part of the game, they dominated, and that probably should have continued. And I think when you look at this Ravens team and how this season has gone so far, I don't know if you need to be taking your foot off the gas pedal. I don't know what it is about this team and leads, but they blew a fourth quarter lead against the Raiders. I would assume that they would have learned a lesson and tried to not do that against the Dallas Cowboys. But there you go. It really just comes down to a failure to make the big plays when you need it. It bit them against Kansas City, although they almost did it. But it bit them against Kansas City. It definitely bit them against the Raiders, and it almost got them here against the Dallas Cowboys. On the Dallas side, they are in real trouble. When it was looking like a blowout, I was starting to wonder, like, is McCarthy getting fired? Because I view Mike McCarthy as the most overrated coach in the National Football League these days, and have for quite some time. And so I will admit that, like, the second there is any kind of a speed wobble out in Dallas, is, Coach gonna get fired? Coaching change? We gonna fire him? I will admit that I have an itchy trigger finger when it comes to that particular coach. And so, yes, I do kind of look for it. But this would be back-to-back horrendous blowouts. And so at least the comeback saves that discussion for a week or so. But still, this is a big issue out in Dallas. And for this Cowboys team, what do they do well? What is at least they do this thing. They have been absolutely beat up now in 2 games. And at least, look, they got a good field goal kicker. So I guess there's that. But they don't have a good coach. The offense isn't really moving the ball all that effectively after beating up on a down Cleveland Browns team in week 1. And defensively, they're not stopping a thing right now. And I get, like, different teams perform differently in different weeks, but I do think that it should be a little eye-opening to Dallas Cowboy fans how easy it was for New Orleans to kind of kick the shit out of your defense last week, and then this week, the problems that New Orleans had against the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that there should be some thought there of like, like NFL math doesn't always add up, but that one seems concerning. And so I think the Cowboys really need to kind of open their eyes and see what is happening there. I do like that Dak is calling his teammates out, and I get the, if you want to get off thing. A lot of people are pointing that to fans or whatever. I kind of think that was a shot to people in the locker room. Like, look, if you guys, because there was a lot of fighting on the sidelines and a lot of bickering, and I kind of wonder if there were a lot of players who were a little upset at the whole Dak Prescott contract situation and how all that was playing out. And I just think that he is just like, look, I'm leader on this team, rightly or wrongly. I'm leader on this team. We are going in this direction. So follow along or get off now. I think that's what he was saying. And so I like that there is some accountability coming from him with that, or holding his teammates accountable. I thought he played fine. The Cowboys, unfortunately, kind of hinge on how he plays, and that's not a good thing for them. He is not that guy, I don't think, and now he's getting paid to be that guy. But I want to make it very clear that a late game comeback that involved an onside kick recovery cannot dictate your feelings on this team. We need to remember this is a bad football club going forward. The Philadelphia Eagles get a win that they needed in a huge way, beating the New Orleans Saints. And now you see Smith go down with an injury, so now it is Goddard and Barkley that step up. This is why you assemble these types of super teams, right? Like, this is why you have, when you are seeing, like, okay, just because I like to pile on, you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs. And when it gets down to playoff time, it's like, okay, well, Matthews got hurt. No, well, there's this. Oh, well, this guy didn't go well. It's like, this is why you accumulate high-level talent the way that these guys have. Because the thought isn't just, hey, you know what's awesome? Having a bunch of awesome players. Like, yes, obviously, that helps. But when injuries happen, to some of them, but when injuries happen, you now still have other high-level players that can step up. And so, yes, when this offense has Brown and Smith and Goddard and Barkley, everything works really, really well. But when a couple of them go down, it shouldn't just throw it all into chaos. It is now, okay, this is time for this guy to step up. Goddard, 3rd and 16, steps up in a big-time way. It is now time for Barkley to step up. He comes up with a couple of big runs that really helps seal this game away. This was really nice to see some of those other pieces stepping up for the Philadelphia Eagles. Hurts still wasn't amazing in this game, but they were able to get the job done. I thought this was a really bad game for Sirianni and the coaching staff. And, like, if you want to get on them for the pass on 4th down on Monday Night Football last week, I guess maybe. Well, we kind of talked about it. Like, I didn't hate that as much as some other people did. I hated 4th and 1 with 12 seconds left in field goal range with no timeouts, and you run the ball. You are then assuming you're going to get like a 21-yard touchdown run on a run up the middle or whatever that play call was to help seal this game out. It ain't happening. That's not going to work. So I do think that there has been some real awful coaching decisions. And again, the Barkley one isn't it, but I do feel like Sirianni has kind of lost his fastball a little bit in the play calling department, and it is hurting this Eagles team actually quite a bit. But again, the defense stepped up. This was the best this defense has looked this season. There was a real speed, there was a real aggression to them, and they did a very good job, at least kind of bottling up this run game and putting some pressure on Derek Carr. And it kind of brings the Saints back down to earth a little bit. We said in the preview last week that the offense was, let's see what happens when this offense gets pushed. And they were pushed this week, and to their credit, like, they hung in this game, right? And they had chances to win, and they just didn't capitalize. But the offense did look slower, it looked significantly less explosive, and it looked a whole lot less comfortable for Derek Carr in this game. And so, yes, maybe the Saints are improved, and this new offensive philosophy where you can actually do play action and actually have some movement, all of this philosophy might be good, but It's still, this isn't as improved of a football team as we thought. The Eagles were doing a really good job of getting pressure on Derek Carr, and then basically everything felt 50-50. It forced Carr into a lot of throws and just panic and just throw it out there. And those, like, it's 50-50 at best. And now when you have Chris Olave, that helps. But he did not look comfortable. This offense didn't look comfortable all game. And I think this is a little bit more what we'll expect to see from the Saints going forward. But again, as we've been saying, even going back to the preseason, this defense is for real, and this defense is very much legit. Moving on to the Sunday Night Football game, the Kansas City Chiefs survive again. There just isn't a whole lot of analysis to do with this team, right? Like, they are a very good football team that make maybe a few too many mistakes and let teams kind of hang around. And that, like, it's been this way for 2 years. And so I have a difficult time overreacting to what we are seeing with now 3 one-possession wins in 3 games when, A, they're 3-0. B, they did this even worse. Like, this is still better than it was last year when they won the whole thing again. So we've kind of just seen this whole story with this team before. So it's tough to just be like, okay, well, now this is the time we actually have to panic, because the rest of the AFC doesn't look as good. You have Baltimore, who is still figuring some things out. Miami, who's going to be on their 3rd quarterback in 3 weeks when they play on Monday night, probably against the Tennessee Titans. The Chargers in your division have taken a step back. Well, maybe not a significant one, but talent-wise, they've taken a step back, although they're a better team maybe than they were last year, but that's, beside the point. The Raiders, who finished 2nd in the division last year, just lost to one of the worst teams football has ever seen. You just kind of bounce around the whole conference, and it still feels like it's Kansas City's to win. And so it's tough to really overreact to a whole lot of this. Also, while I maybe wasn't as high on Cincinnati and Atlanta as others, it's still like Baltimore, Cincinnati, Atlanta. Those are 3 pretty good teams that you just knocked off to pick up a win and get your season going in the first 3 weeks of the year. That ain't bad. And if we're giving grace to some of these other teams, well, oh yeah, no, it'll click as the season goes on. Oh yeah, no. But Kansas City, like I can't really overreact to it. It's the offense doesn't look as dynamic as maybe you would hope, especially after what we saw in week 1. Worthy isn't going to be able to bust off Tyreek Hill-esque plays every single week. Rashee Rice might. He looks amazing. But now with no Pacheco and basically a fullback in there running plays, it's not as explosive, it's not as dynamic, but they still come up with those big plays in winning times that get them the plays and the victories that they need. For the Falcons, I hated some of those play calls, 3rd and 4th down, the runs. Like, I get Bijan is your best guy. I think you have to get him involved in the pass game and just give yourself some other options. A run to the outside on 4th down, if the other team gets there and cuts it off, like, you have nothing. And I get that that's literally every play where, oh yeah, if the other team defends it well, then you're screwed. Like, yes, that's how the sport works. And so maybe not the most in-depth analysis, but it just, like, on those particular ones, like, even if it's something up the middle, maybe you can at least bounce into a cutback lane or something. When the defense outflanks you on the outside and you aren't able to turn that corner, there just isn't a whole lot of room, and now you're getting trapped because the sideline's there. You're kind of stuck. And so I don't love some of that play calling there. Overall, like, that they were in it for the most part. And what we said about how the Chiefs would defend kind of came true, where they were just content, like, yeah, just if you're going to beat us, it's going to be Mooney, or maybe a little bit in the run game. And the run game got going. But Drake London having a huge late drive to end up going over that receiving total was so annoying, because we had that one bagged the whole game, and then he just goes nuts on the last few drives to get over the top. But it was nice to hit that Mooney over by the 2nd quarter. And so I don't know, like, for the Falcons, I don't think that this is oh, well, they are screwed. I also don't think this is hey, look how well they hung with the champs, back they come. This is just kind of all right, well, they played well. And it still has looked better than it did in week 1, so at least there's that. It might start to get really bad out in San Francisco. That was a really, really bad loss. And I get that they have a lot of injuries right now. That loss is unacceptable. You cannot get so soundly outcoached and outplayed in the second half and in the 4th quarter of a game the way that San Francisco did. And yes, it would help if you weren't throwing to Jawan Jennings and if it wasn't just Mason running it to try to put that game away. But those guys actually, like, played all right. You cannot allow that sort of a loss to happen if you're San Francisco with, again, all the injuries you are dealing with, but the Rams are also dealing with a lot of injuries. And I don't think you can allow for that type of a loss to happen in a division game when, like, Seattle looks improved. Arizona looks really improved. And this is going to be a battle all season long. You have a chance to get a win over a division opponent and you let it slip away in that fashion. That is a really, really difficult loss to take for the 49ers. And now this is 2 in a row. Pretty bad losses for San Francisco. On the Rams side, I still don't know if there's anything actionable about this. I still see people listing them as one that could make the playoffs. With the injuries they have, I just don't see it. But this was coaching brilliance yesterday by McVay. And it was still, it's Stafford not giving up. And it's Williams just being an absolute tank and just getting the absolute most out of every inch of talent that they had out on that football field to end up getting the job done. So it is a good win, but I don't think it is an actionable one for the Rams. If anything for us, I think that this may lead to them being a little bit overpriced in some following matchups. And that might be something we can exploit going forward. The Vikings, I think we might have to start taking them seriously. I had said in the NFC win total preview that I liked the Vikings, I think, a little bit more than other people did. I just couldn't justify getting them. I think it was over 7.5. I just don't see this being an 8-win team. And they look good. Like all the things that we were talking about from last year, where like this team actually like won quite a few games and had bad quarterback play. So even if Sam Darnold is just kind of average, they might actually move things a little bit. And they did that. Like this was a really good performance again from Sam Darnold, and he gets banged up, so we'll see what happens. But this has been the best he has looked at times in his career. And Aaron Jones is being used like a legitimate playmaker. This is a players not plays sort of a thing where they have kind of understood, look, we have Justin Jefferson, best wide receiver in the league. After that, we don't got a whole lot. So Aaron Jones is our second best player. Let's use him as if he is our second best player. They use him in the passing game. He's obviously been dynamic in the run. This is a legitimately, I think, good team. I don't know. Like, I'm not racing out for Vikings Super Bowl futures or anything like that. But offensively, this team's moving it. And defensively, this is back-to-back really strong performances from this defense. And again, I know the injury issues on San Francisco, but they kind of shut those guys down. And they just ate the lunch of the Houston Texans. And so Brian Flores, for all the shit he took for some of that stuff in Miami and all of that, holy hell, man, is this guy coaching the hell out of this defense right now. On the Texans side, I know, like we just said, hey, the Vikings are legit. Watch out for them. But also, these guys just lost to the Vikings. That's a little concerning. It is weird to talk out of both sides of your mouth that way, but I do think there is something to that, where like the Texans... The Texans have some issues here. Their offense has looked good exactly once, and that was against an Indianapolis Colts defense that, quite frankly, we have no respect for at all. And so, like Chicago, good defense, shut them down. Vikings, good defense, shut them down. But the Texans are in a different stratosphere now, right? They are in a different level where we are talking about them as a potential Super Bowl contender. And last time I checked, you are going to have to play some good teams if you're going to get to the Super Bowl. So you can't just be like, played a good defense, on to the next one. It's like, no. No, if you, like, it's fine if you're, I don't know, name a team, the Raiders. And it's like, okay, well, good defense, shut us down. On to next week, because their expectations aren't that high. But for the Texans, when you want to win the division, win playoff games, and get to the Super Bowl, you're going to have to face good defenses, and you're going to have to figure it out. And right now, this offense really isn't figuring it out. There is just something off with them. They can't run the ball at all. That, I think, might be a bit of an issue. And now, the run stats might be a little skewed, because down 34-7, you're not exactly worried about establishing the run. But I do think that it is putting them in some disadvantageous situations, and that is setting them back in some really big ways. So I do think that this is going to be something that gets fixed, but this is a problem. And another thing to watch out for is the defensive side of the football. When, like, they looked very good against Chicago, but that, like, it just became obvious what you needed to do against Chicago. Bring one extra rusher, and you're going to completely shut them down. They gave Anthony Richardson what right now looks like easily his best game of the season. And now in this game, they kind of got diced apart by Sam Darnold. that is not a who's who of quarterbacks right now, given what we've seen from Anthony Richardson the last 2 weeks. So I think there's real concern about what's happening on the defensive side of the ball with the Houston Texans as well. Back into the NFC, the Green Bay Packers, they're just good, man. Like Matt LaFleur, this has been a masterclass in coaching the last couple of weeks and kind of understanding the lack of variety that the Indianapolis Colts are going to throw at you. And I think also then going into this one, and yes, they were given some great spots by the Tennessee Titans, but I do also think that there has to be a recognition of like that this team went out and executed a game plan almost perfectly. And the Titans did a better job of bottling up Josh Jacobs. They just didn't bottle up Malik Willis. There is so much talent on this team that they've been able to get a lot out of this kid and do a really, really good job. And so when Jordan Love comes back, you have to feel very confident about this team as a real legitimate threat in not just the NFC North, but in the NFC in general. And on the defensive side, like they just put themselves in positions to win. But this is back-to-back weeks where the defenses looked pretty good. We will get to maybe why they look good this week in a second when we talk about the Titans. But defensively, this team stepped up. And they stepped up last week against the Indianapolis Colts as well. That was kind of an under-discussed part of everything last week, was that the Colts' like defensive game plan wasn't very good, and it allowed the Packers to kind of hang around and do their thing. But also, you had a Green Bay defense that held Indy to 10 points. And now they go out and they do it again against the Tennessee Titans. So I'm not going to say like this is a good defensive football team yet, because we have some questions about the offenses that they have shut down. But I do think that this is a team that you do need to start taking seriously. And like I said, really, really seriously. I mean, look, I've been taking him seriously, and if you've been watching and kind of following along, they were my pick to go to the Super Bowl in the NFC this year. So that feels great right now, because I think that this is a legitimately very good team, and we'll see as the season goes on. They have a real interesting matchup with the Vikings coming up next week. The Tennessee Titans have a quarterback problem. Like, it's not getting better. And I get it's only 3 weeks, and to just assume that he's going to go from what we saw in week 1 to now being Tom Brady in week 3. Like, I know it doesn't work that way. And I know I'm being very impatient right now. But this was supposed to be okay, we have surrounded you with talent now go out and do it. We got you in the second round when a lot of people thought you were a first or second round talent. You are not looking like it so far. And you had at least a bit of a taste of the starter life last year. These things shouldn't be as overwhelming for you this year. And they are. The decision-making and the processing are significant issues. And like I get you have, again, a young quarterback, but it's so bad. It's just like, I don't know how else to put it. It is putting yourself in some really, really bad spots. And like this is a good football team, I think. They have brought in some really good veteran players. And with even just average quarterback play, they are at least 2-1. And I don't know, like maybe they still lose this game today, but I do, Sunday. I don't know why I'm doing that. I didn't watch anything today. But maybe they still lose this game, but he is not giving them any chance in any of these things at all. And I get with these veteran, like with a young quarterback, the thought is, well, let's let him figure it out. Let's let him see. Let's see what we have in him, and let's kind of go. But you do have some veteran players on this team. Like, it's not like this is a young group that is just on the rise and they're all going to get better. Like, you brought in quite a few veterans across the board to try to like get everything fixed on this team, and it's not working, and it is becoming, I think, a real problem with the Titans. And at least the one thing you can say around Will Levis is you have surrounded him with enough things that you now know what he is, right? And I'm not saying after 3 games. I'm saying now after 17. When the season is done, you have at least, you can't say, like with Sam Darnold with the Jets before, where I was like, yeah, I mean, it didn't go well, but like the offensive line sucked and he had one good guy to pass to. Or what it would have been with Drake May this year, where it's like, yeah, he has 2 NFL players on the offense total. Like, what are we doing here? You don't have that. With this team, you have an offensive line with 2 first-round picks on it that I think is doing pretty well. You have a run game that has been able to kind of get going in the first 3 3 weeks. You have Calvin Ridley, who, while inconsistent, is quite talented. You have DeAndre Hopkins, who, while injured, is still quite talented. You have enough pieces around him that if it continues to look this bad, you kind of know he ain't it. And it maybe seems a bit quick to just drop it. I do think that they are kind of in a spot that they don't have to pay him right away, I don't think. I can't imagine. This is only his second year, right? Yeah, we're still ways away from figuring out the we have to pay him conversation. So maybe you have a little bit more runway with it. But I do think if this season continues to go the way that it is going, and you are in a position to draft a good young quarterback next year, you just do that. And if there's one that wants to come in free agency or is available in trade, you go out and do that if this continues. If it doesn't, if it doesn't present itself, if you're drafting fourth and the 3 NFL kids go 1, 2, 3, all right, well, let's give it another go with the kid and move on, because he's still quite inexpensive, and let's just try to make the best of it. But I don't think he's playing himself into we need to see a little bit more so far, because he's actively costing them games with awful decisions. Week 1, it's the pick 6 that gets the Bears back in it and lets them win. Week 2, another interception, they lose a 1-score game. And in this one, more ball control issues and more tough situations that put your defense in some bad spots that allowed Green Bay to thrive. So overall, problems for the Titans is kind of what I'm getting at. Not so much out in Seattle. This breakdown won't be as much. They just kind of took care of business. Also, sorry. Hi, Deeds. Howdy. I saw you in the chat there, but was mid-rant, and so didn't want to stop. But hello, Deeds. Thank you. Thanks for popping in today. Really appreciate it. The Seattle Seahawks go out and take care of business. And that was one of those games that you watch it for 3 minutes. It's like, well, probably should have thought more of Seattle in this one. And I do think eventually that ended up being a pick that I clicked and a game that we do end up predicting right. But I wasn't as confident about it and wish I would have banged that one home a little bit more. Because it was just, as that game got going, it was so clear how one-sided this was going to be. Was a little scared at how difficult it was for Seattle to get by Denver and New England, but this was not that. The offense looked great. The defense looked fantastic. This was a real complete effort from a Seattle team that is now 3-0 and is looking like they are a real, I'm not going to put them in the Green Bay tier just yet of like actual legitimate contender, but they're a threat for the division, and I wouldn't want to go into Seattle in the wild card round or the divisional round at all. The Dolphins, meanwhile, they take more hits. Skylar Thompson goes down with an injury in his game. In this game, this could get real ugly out in Miami real quick. The thing that worries me the most, and I get we kind of all agree Skylar Thompson's a limited option at the quarterback spot now, and now you go past him. I think it's Tim Boyle who they brought in, also limited. This was supposed to be the good spot, right? Like not that it was against Seattle, because the Seahawks are actually quite good. And defensively, the Seahawks, I think, are really good. But this was supposed to be the extra prep time, right? Like, you're coming off of the Thursday nighter, so you have 10 days to prepare for this team, and they just took you to the woodshed, man. Like, they beat the holy hell out of them in this game. And so, and also, like, they were coming off an overtime game last week. So while you were sitting at home being able to prepare, they were going an extra quarter against a New England team that maybe you shouldn't have to do that against. And it ended up being a real challenge for them. And so to have that extra rest edge, that extra time to game plan and try to figure out how to make life easier on your young quarterback, to come out with that is a little bit concerning. They do have now a little bit of extra time again going into Monday night against the Tennessee Titans, but I am not confident that they're going to be able to get that thing rolling. This looked concerningly bad today. Still some concerns out in Detroit. The Lions, they get a win, but they don't answer the questions we had from them. I like the Cardinals quite a bit this season. I think we've established this. That is not a defense that should be giving you those problems. And again, they still got the win, but there was a pick 6 that got called back for a stupid, the 2-minute warning hit, when it was very obviously 2:01 by the time the ball was snapped. I wish they paid that close attention to the play clock. And so for that to happen, I'm not going to say completely changed the game, because there's still a whole second half after that, but it might have shifted how the dynamic of that game was going to go. And so that is a little concerning from a Detroit standpoint. And then the offense doesn't really get going until there's a trick play involved. And I've said this a couple of times and a few times. It is nice to have trick plays. It's really bad to need trick plays. And they have now needed some trickery, some trickeration to get the offense going again. And that is concerning for me. Goff has not looked comfortable. And this was supposed to be the year. All these games are indoors, and you have now another weapon in Jameson Williams to go out and do these things with. It is another year with Jahmyr Gibbs figuring out how to be one of the more explosive players in the NFL. You have all of these different things going for you, and it's just not clicking. And so again, this was supposed to be the year. This was supposed to be the time that the Detroit Lions clicked, and it's not clicking right now. Goff, again, this was not a defense to struggle against. And the defense you struggled against last week in Tampa Bay kind of got eaten up by Bo Nix this week. And again, NFL math doesn't work that way, but still, this game does not bring down any of the red flags I had for Detroit. And honestly, makes me feel pretty good about Carolina. Kyler Murray was kept in check by this defense, and they contained the run a little bit more than other teams have done in the past. But still, Kyler goes out. He gets Harrison a touchdown. Wilson gets a touchdown. The run game was still kind of effective. They just ultimately didn't come up with the big plays that they needed at the times to get those wins. But ultimately, this was supposed to be a team they lost to, and they did, but they hung around in it. This was one where Carolina bumps up, in my eyes, a little bit. Steelers against the Chargers, it kind of was what we thought it was going to be, not necessarily a masterpiece. It does really drive home this Steelers defense is legit and maybe the best in the NFL. Told y'all on the Patrick Queen thing, just saying. Not that there was a whole lot of pushback, but still. The offense, still not great, but 20 points against the Chargers, no one's done that so far. So I'm not saying, watch out, here come the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think the offense is equal parts lacking talent and not being run well, and so there's that also. But no, this is a good team. For the Chargers, I don't know if there's a lot here. Defensively, they played kind of well. Giving up 20 points to Pittsburgh for the first time this year isn't awesome on the resume, but still, that's the toughest test they have faced, and I think for the most part passed. They lost, but they passed. Herbert, the injury stuff continues to be a concern. And you do have to worry about this being an ongoing thing all year. You kind of just, maybe 3 weeks rest won't help. But you kind of just want to be hey, can you just not for a couple of weeks and try to get this thing figured out? And we'll take our lumps. I mean, we're not winning because of great quarterback play anyway. So let's just take our lumps without you, and you try to get this figured out. Because I do think there's something there with this team. But it's not if Herbert's only going to play 3 quarters every week. The Bears have established now, it's not it. Not it this year. Williams at least showed a couple of signs of life this week, but this offense is going nowhere. Swift is not helping in the run game. We are now into 3 spots where, oh no, he's good. It's just not whatever. They're not using him right. It's not whatever. Well, they're using him in the ways we want him to be used, and it's not working. And this is now 3 teams where it isn't working. So maybe Swift just isn't all that good. The receivers are getting hurt all the time, so that's not great. The offensive line has issues that continue to be a real problem, and Williams has to run for his life an awful lot. And so while I do think Williams is going to be good, and I do think Roma Dunze is going to be good, I do not think it's going to be this year. And so the breakout for the Bears that I keep waiting for keeps not happening, and I'm now done waiting for it. I will say, this defense is for real. This defense is just ferocious, and it's going to keep them in a lot of games. But again, the Colts do not mix things up on defense all that much, and for the Bears to have the issues that they had with it, it's concerning, at least I think, from a Chicago standpoint. For the Colts, they survive. This is back-to-back Quiet Richardson games, which is not great. I have him in 2 fantasy leagues, and it's not helping, that's for sure. And I don't see a lot of signs that it's going to get better. Again, this was a good Bears defense, so you don't want to overreact too much. But the only game that he did well in, he completed 9 passes, right? So unless those huge plays are going to be there, I don't think that he is ready to methodically move an offense down the field. Again, they still get the win, but there you go. And at least the defense held their own this week. I am going to refuse to let 2 low-scoring games from this defense fool me into thinking that this is a good defense. The Broncos get their first win of the year. The defense really came to play on Sunday. Nick started to use his legs a little bit more, which might be a bit of a game changer to kind of help at least sustain some drives for this offense and get the defense a little bit of rest. That whole complementary football thing, win the field position battle and whatnot. So maybe that helps a little bit. I am still not going to buy into this team at all, but good on them for getting the win. For the Bucks, this is a nice reminder that they are a good team, not a great team. I think like this offense was absolutely shut down by Denver. Nowhere to run. Now they were down early, and teams tend to abandon the run when that happens. But nowhere to run early. Godwin makes a nice catch in the end zone, but they really did a good job of shutting down Evans in this game. I'll have to go back and watch a whole lot of it. I was mainly just red zoning the whole day. But I want to see like what were they doing on Evans that just completely took him out of this game. I have some thoughts, but I will wait to go back and actually watch that to see. But this whole game was just like a nice reminder that the Bucks were our biggest win last year and helped make it a winning year around these parts last season. But that doesn't make them a great football team. It just means we saw that the market was wildly underestimating them last year and jumped on it. And so now this year, they're 2-0, things are going good. All right, these are our guys again. It's like, wait, mid. They are still mid, and because of that, they will put up good performances like we saw against Detroit, but they are also very much capable of just absolutely shitting the bed. And so to just have them locked in, week out as a team to play is just not the way that we should be doing this. They are, I think we had maybe Denver a touch lower than we should have, although I don't think so, but we definitely had Tampa Bay a little bit higher than I should have in my mental power ratings of this whole thing. Giants-Browns was as bad as we thought it was going to be, but we've established like Malik Neighbors is a beast. I thought Rome Odunze was going to be the best, like the second best receiver in this draft and better than Neighbors. And he still might be, but he has a long way to go because Neighbors just looks like an absolute beast. And an absolute world beater. The kid is just phenomenal. Meanwhile, the Browns, like they're terrible. They scored on the opening possession after getting a fumble recovery just outside of the red zone off the opening kickoff, and then didn't score again against the Giants until the fourth quarter. Watson, terrible. We need to save Amari Cooper from him. Cooper makes an amazing catch down the sideline or was it for the touchdown? I think it was down the sideline. And like he is so talented. But this is such, and it is immeasurable how screwed up this franchise is. Moving on. Speaking of embarrassing franchises, the Carolina Panthers are on the board as they step up and beat the Raiders. Andy Dalton picked this Raiders team apart, and I said that I didn't think he was going to bring that much life into this team. I still said this is one of the least talented teams in the NFL, and yes, quarterback was an issue, but it's not the biggest issue. Oops. He came in and just ripped apart my favorite team in the Raiders. And I said on Let's Raid, the Vegas Raiders podcast that we do here, it ended up being Saturday morning, but leading up to kickoff anyway. You're going to be able to catch that right here on the Couch Potato Diary feed. For YouTube fans, the people watching on YouTube later, there's there is a playlist on the YouTube channel for just Raider stuff. And I said on there, like, this is not a game you should lose. Like, this is to come off of that win last week against Baltimore. You're moving the football well. This is, I get it's Andy Dalton, but still, like, that is an immobile quarterback back there that Max Crosby should be able to just feast on. And he didn't, and potentially banged up, whatever. But this was a sound and thorough ass kicking. And on the Carolina side, it does, I don't want to overreact. Because the very obvious thing is, okay, well, Bryce Young was the problem. And I don't think that's the case. I think this team sucks. I really do. And I don't think Bryce Young is the problem. But I will say, that looked different. That looked energized. That looked fired up. It looked so much different for Carolina. And it felt like a team sending a message to Bryce and to ownership that, hey, maybe it's not us. Maybe it is him. And again, it's 1 week. I don't want to read too much into it. I am not there. But it is very easy to draw that comparison. On the Raiders side of things, I kind of, in my notes, I kind of went on a rant. I'm not going to go into this whole thing. I've basically now prepped half of Let's Rate at least. But every aspect of the game, the Raiders were dreadful in. How does that defense hold you to 218 yards passing before you make a change at quarterback? How does that offense put up 34 points when they had scored 13 in the previous 2 games? Even Carlson's missing field goals out there. And he was only 0 for 1 because they couldn't even move the ball into field goal range. This was an abysmal performance. And Pierce calling out the team, saying like, yeah, a lot of business decisions were being made. We'll make some business decisions too. I'm interested to see what that looks like. And now this is the test for him, right? They have the Browns next week, who, as previously stated, suck. But I do also admit Carolina sucks. And they just kicked the shit out of the Raiders. So now, this is where I think a real test of the Antonio Pierce thing kind of comes together. This is not a talented football team. And any suggestion otherwise is insane. Although I do like the talent of the pass catchers that they have. And again, like you have Crosby, you have Wilker. Like this isn't, the cupboards aren't bare like they are seemingly in Carolina right now. But this is not an overly talented football team. This is a team that wins with effort, quite frankly. And the effort was bad. So now that you have this and you have sent this message, how does the team respond? This is going to be a very telling week. And I don't think ratings for Browns Raiders is going to be super high this week. And again, I don't think Scott Hansen is going to be popping in much during the witching hour for this game. But I will say that this is going to tell you a lot about Antonio Pierce as a coach and these players in what they think of him. So while we don't want to read too much into one game on the Carolina side, I am going to be reading a whole lot into what happens out in Carolina, out against Cleveland next week. Okay, quickly shifting gears into the Canadian Football League. That was a long NFL segment. Out in the CFL, this isn't going to be as in-depth here, but the Riders do get a win. It wasn't pretty all the time, but they do come up with those winning plays when they need it. And some of that was penalty aided for sure, but they come up with a couple of big plays. They are now firmly in the race for the second playoff spot out in the West, having some breathing room now on Edmonton and Calgary. Not a lot, but some is really important for this team. The fact that they were finally able to get something going in the run game with Armstead, who was running like this was his last chance, and it kind of is. And so that is, while I liked Hickson and made the mistake on the Rider Happy Hour saying like, oh yeah, this guy's going to go over in his run total. This was why I was a little pissed that I couldn't find a run total for Armstead going into this game, because Calgary's run defense is dog shit. But this was such a huge breath of fresh air for Saskatchewan to have that dynamic of a playmaker, making plays in the run game, making life easy for Trevor Harris. Going down to the fourth quarter, he had like 18 passes. Like this was not a pass-heavy game. The Riders just ran it down Calgary's throats and then came up with enough big plays defensively to get the victory. For Calgary, this feels done. I have been pretty consistently putting them at the bottom of my power rankings the last little while. I think you can see why. They get the big play on the quarterback sneak, which, wow. Against a Riders team that has been just dominant in the run game this season. And then they were able to get a little bit there with Mills going, and he was able to actually break one of the bets that we did have, where we had him under for his total. But still, this was... yeah, the stamp's been done before it started. Toxic, that's fair. It felt like if they were going to be undone, that this was going to be the week to do it. That this was going to be the time. Saskatchewan hadn't won since like June. It had been 7 games, and it had been since 2001. 2021, since the Riders had won after Labor Day. That's insanity. But still, this was your opportunity to get back into this playoff race. And when you think to where this team was going into the Labor Day doubleheader with Edmonton, and then this one here with Saskatchewan, with Montreal in between there. But you had an opportunity going into that Edmonton one where it was like, yes, no, this Edmonton thing, nice and cute. We're going to put it in the dirt. It wasn't even Trey Ford doing that against the Stamps, right? It was McLeod Bethel Thompson who was picking them apart. You had a chance to just be like, hey, this is cute, fun story, but it's going to be like last year, or it's a fun story for a last place football team. Now know your place and go sit down there. Instead, Edmonton was just keeping the basement warm for Calgary, who is now, I think, firmly planted in there and have a long way to go to get out of it. I think, again, your concerns about the quarterback are legitimate. I don't think he's the reason they lost, but it didn't come up with the big plays when they needed. And this defense that was supposed to be the strength of this team this year, doing the CFL previews and all of these things, you look at the talent they have on the defensive side of the roster. When I was doing my difference makers this year going into this season, all of them were on the Stamp side. All of them on the Stamp side were on the defense. And that defense has been a difference maker, and it's why they're losing. And that is just shocking to me. Hamilton stays hot with a win over the Argos. I said before, it felt like a good matchup for Hamilton. They are playing a whole lot better, and now the Argos really have to play better if they want to get this thing into the postseason. I mean, I don't think Hamilton's going to catch Toronto. I really don't. And honestly, I think that Saskatchewan win on Friday really does help with the crossover thing a little bit. It's going to be tough for Hamilton to get into there, but they're playing some good football. But the Argos now, I think, really have to figure things out. Again, this is a talented defensive group that has been picked apart just a few too many times this year to really believe in them going forward. For Montreal, they reestablished themselves as the best team in the league. Nice little get back on track game against an Ottawa team who they do stack up really well against. And now for Ottawa, I don't think Toronto is much of an issue for you standings-wise, although still a few weeks left, like that could change for sure. But you need to figure out why you can't figure out Montreal and what you're going to do to try to fix this now. And out in Winnipeg, they slow down Edmonton. They tried to make Trey Ford beat them with his arm. They were rushing for, and I think had 2 spies on him, which is quite the thing to do in the CFL with all the receivers running around and all the space that is out there anyway. And so they did a good job in kind of limiting that. Brady Oliveira looked like a beast. I don't know what it is. I still do not feel fully locked in on Winnipeg as like the clear, number one in this league. And in the West, more specifically. Like I still think they're gettable for BC, very much so. Like, I still think if we were playing Madden and CFL teams were included, and you could just like best on, like everyone is playing at their best, who wins? It's BC. And honestly, I don't think it's that close. But Winnipeg just keeps winning these games, and BC just can't really click it. And honestly, I even think the best version of Saskatchewan at least gives this group a run for their money. So I'm not there yet with pushing Winnipeg as the team in the West, but I will say they keep getting results, and that whole know how to win thing, they definitely do that. We'll see how that goes now in the final bit of September into October, and then November. All right, that's going to do it for all the football talk today. Let's do some quick baseball talk, as, you know, just something that's never happened before. It keeps popping up. So, Shohei Ohtani's pretty good, okay? Didn't get to this one last week, just honestly forgot, which is, I think, a bit of a statement on baseball right now, but still, this is like nothing we've ever seen before. It is truly special what Shohei Ohtani is doing, and the mix of all of the talent that he has with, like, the power hitting and the speed, honestly, like, they have him playing DH. He could play right field and be, I think, very good at it. Like, if they were just like, you know what? Pitching's not a thing for you anymore, my man. But now that the elbow's fine, you mind playing out and right? Because we kind of need you. He would be one of the best right fielders in baseball. Like, he is just that talented that he is going to be that guy. And it is unbelievable what this cat has been able to do on this Dodgers team. I know there are some people in Mets land who think that Lindor should get the MVP for dragging the Mets into the postseason. I will say, although there is some, weird math going on with how the Dodgers are running their offense, or not running, sorry, with how the Dodgers are running their payroll, with deferred, all of that. Mets have a higher payroll than the Dodgers, so they're dragging this plucky group of youngsters making $323 million into the playoffs. What an unbelievable year for Francisco Lindor, who, yes, is having a great year, but come on. Yeah, like Toxic saying, Ohtani is worth his money already, and he's just been a DH. He's going to pitch next year. And on it, like, he finished 4th in Cy Young voting last year. he is going to win the MVP. He is one of the great players we have ever seen. And this next little chunk here is going to be basically the only time I say anything negative about the dude. And how fun is it going to be to get to see him in the playoffs now? Like, it is an unbelievable treat. And yes, I know I got the Blue Jay stuff on today. Stings a little bit with all of them, right? Because he was on the plane. He was going to be a Blue Jay. That this was going to be a thing that happened, and then it didn't, in extremely heartbreaking fashion. And that was a major bummer. And so yes, there is the slightest bit of a ooh every time he's doing it, but that left in, like, for the most part, that left in April, because what he is doing is so special, and you can't hate the guy. The one thing I will say, yes, I know, chemically enhanced and whatnot, but we need to stop forgetting how good Barry Bonds was. And we can have the steroids discussion, Toxic and Deeds. I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of my stuff before, so maybe this is broken record to you guys in the chat. But I kind of feel like if you didn't want to include Barry Bonds in history, then you should have busted him when he was doing his thing. Because honestly, how fucking hard would it have been? Right? But now that we want to legislate all of this after, and I am talking all the steroids guys, right? Like McGuire, Clemens, A-Rod. No, A-Rod's different because he got suspended, so I'll take the A-Rod one off. But, like, Bonds, Clemens, McGuire, so, like, all these guys who you had doing all these things, and there was the needles in the locker room and all of that, and you just let it slide for one reason or another. Okay, but now you can't legislate it after. If you want to bust these guys and you want to take them out of history, then you shouldn't have let them make history in the first place. And so to me, if they got suspended or whatever, then that's a different thing. And yes, there's like documentaries saying like, yeah, he totally took steroids. All right, well, he didn't break any of your rules because you didn't catch him and you didn't suspend him. So you must have been okay with it. Also, he was also hitting tanks off of guys who were on steroids. Everyone was on steroids, so it's all fine. The one thing I will say is all the talk of like, and again, it's generational talent, and it is like all of it makes Shohei Ohtani probably the greatest baseball player of all time. At least the most talented baseball player of all time. Okay? Cool. Let's stop with he's a better hitter and better overall offensive player than Barry Bonds. Shohei Ohtani. And now this is probably shifted here a little bit, and so maybe I should kind of readjust the total here on the fly. But after his gigantic game, which again, I can't believe I'm now going to say anything negative about this guy. Oh shit, his WAR went up quite a bit actually in the last little bit. But after that game, his WAR was at 8.4. So let's just see here real quick. Barry Bonds WAR. Let's get this. Well, let's get this all caught up and right up to date here. His career WAR was 162.8, which is just, again, absurd. I had trouble finding this the other day, and there we go. Here's WAR. And so when we sort by WAR, so let's cut off here. I know none of you are seeing this, and for podcast listeners, it's even worse. But all right, so he had a couple of seasons at 8.1 and 8.2. But with Shohei Ohtani's 8.4 WAR, this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This would be Barry Bonds' 9th best season. And again, yes, a lot of that enhanced. But I will say, the years that he did this, had the better WAR than Shohei. One of 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004. So yes, those are kind of the times we kind of assumed something was happening. But there is also 1990 when he was like 180 pounds, 92, 93, and 96. So there is a mix of what we assume to be the before and after for Barry Bonds. We forget how unbelievable this guy was in his career and how just absurd what Barry Bonds did. So yeah, no, 100%. Barry Bonds was one of the, what Shohei Ohtani is doing right now is like nothing we have ever seen before. But we're talking about Shohei starting like the 50-50 club. Barry Bonds started the 400-400 and the 500-500 club. Like he is the only guy in those, in that neighborhood, in that neck of the woods. And what he did was incredible. So yes, Shohei Ohtani, most talented, all of those things ever. Let's just stop with the Bonds thing, because that is a different animal. It is apples to oranges a little bit, but let's just let's remember, whatever went into it, literally and figuratively, fine. But what Bonds did was like nothing we have ever seen before. And what Shohei did was like nothing we've ever seen before. None of what I said takes anything away from what Shohei Ohtani did. But none of what Shohei Ohtani is doing this year takes away from anything that Barry Bonds did in his career, because it was insane. So, rant over. All right, let's shift to the world of people getting punched in the head, because we had two very intriguing fights in the boxing world this weekend. We do still have a lot to come on this show, and I know I'm already going long, so thank you guys for hanging out today. We still got NBA, a little bit NBA talk. We got some NHL preview coming up, and we got some Calgary Flames talk for the Calgary folks in here. But let's get into the boxing, because it was a really interesting card and really interesting weekend in the world of face punching. All right, we will start with Jaime Munguia, who wasn't perfect, but got the job done on Friday night in his win over Banzignan, which, by the way, I just want to state, no one actually came after me, but, you know, you work at a place with a text line for a decade. You start to anticipate people making fun of you about things. I know I've kind of butchered the pronunciation of Banzignan, and I know I've said it differently the entire fight week, and now, again, I do want to say, this is a cat who, his name was being said differently on the broadcast on Friday. They would go to Kriegel, the guy who, I'd probably screen that one up too, the guy who's doing the corner reporting while also scoring the fights, which seems tricky to do, but whatever, he's very talented at what he does. He was saying it differently than the play-by-play guy, who was saying it differently than the Tim Bradley who was doing the color commentary. Like, fuck, man, how am I supposed to know? So anyway, the Canadian Banzignan did, I think, a pretty good job. His jab was giving Munguia issues early in the fight. Munguia very clearly, like, Munguia, I like Munguia a lot. And Jaime is one where he can fight at range pretty well. But his bread and butter is getting inside and just with great speed and ferocity fucking you up. That is what he likes to do. Work the body, land some good stuff to the head, but get an in tight and some of that phone booth fighting. Which is quite something for someone who has the pace that he has. And Munguia was still coming forward, but Banzignan early on was doing a good job of literally beating him to the punch and getting that jab going, keeping Munguia at range, kind of dictating not necessarily the pace, because I do think the pace was one that Munguia was comfortable with, but keeping the range where Banzignan wanted it to be. And that was giving him an edge and actually winning him quite a few of these. The overall story of this fight is actually how close it ended up being. I didn't think Banzignan was on Munguia's level, and I do think, like, by the time it wrapped up, here, I have my notebook here. Where did I finish? Wrong notebook, right? It's under, I'm using it as a mic stand today. But I had it, I think, Munguia up one round going into that 10th. And then he gets the knockout win. So Banzignan did a really good job of dictating where the fight was. And again, not so much the pace, but just kind of controlling things with what he was able to do and limiting what Munguia wanted to do. But as the fight went on, Munguia got better. And I do think there's a bit of that maturity that we talked about, and we'll get to that in a second here. But the thing that really paid off was the investment in those body shots. And that's why I call it the investment. More often than not, unless you are like one of the great whatevers, one shot to the body isn't going to stop a fight. Isn't even going to change a fight. And so we don't see it so much in MMA because you only have 3 rounds and you got 15 minutes. And if you want to set something up like this, like Munguia was actively losing rounds while working on this body strategy. And so in MMA, great, you can do that in a 3-round fight once. And then all of a sudden, okay, well, now it's a 3rd round. Good thing I invested. I'm down to nothing, and I need to now kill this guy. In boxing, when you have 12 rounds to work with, you can take a couple rounds. And if you've just been working on the body, that investment continues to pay off. And that's what happened here. That investment in body shots really started to pay off as this fight went along. It didn't necessarily slow Banzignan down, because he was there the whole way. But Banzignan wasn't throwing a ton of power punches anyway. And the ones that he was throwing started to have a little less snap to him. It was a little less whoof and a little more going on. And that is an over-exaggeration. Again, the caveat on all of this, every fighter I have ever talked about on this show could beat me up so quickly. This is just, I enjoy watching the fights and I enjoy breaking them down. And so what you saw was some of the snap being taken off of those punches. And when you're not getting a ton of power from those anyway, that really does start to allow you to dictate the kind of game plan that Munguia wanted to do. And that's what happened in this fight. The jab was giving him some problems early. And there was a bit of a counter game that was coming from Banzignan as well that was, again, keeping Munguia from really unloading in the ways that he wanted to. And even when Munguia was getting close, once there was a bit of an exit, Banzignan was landing a couple pretty good shots usually. And that was allowing him to not necessarily steal the momentum, but not let Munguia get fully comfortable and fully into that role that we have seen him get on against some other fighters. But again, there's less snap to it, and it's just not really working out as this goes along. And then there becomes a moment where, okay, the jab is there, but Munguia isn't as concerned about it because, okay, now the power's gone. Now I can start to walk you down. And that is where Munguia really starts to tee off. He's landing to the body well. Again, continuing that investment. Now he's landing some power punches to the head. Now he's landing in bunches. Now he's crowding Banzignan. And now this fight is taking place in the area that Munguia wants it to. Brilliant stuff from Munguia, kind of assessing what's going on. How can I manage this? Because jabs are like inherently a little bit difficult to just get inside on, right? You have to find your way to get in there, and Banzignan was doing a good job. And so Munguia, recognizing like, okay, that this is not going to be something I can just walk through, I need to try to limit this in a way. And he did, and then he was able to get inside, and that's where the finish does come. He rocked him a couple rounds earlier, and then in the 10th, he lands some real good combination that gets him on roller skates, and then puts the final coffin nail in, and wraps this thing up in really impressive fashion. But overall, Banzignan showed really well. I don't, again, shout out to the Canadian, Laval, Quebec. I don't view him as the sky's the limit sort of a fighter. Like, I don't think that's, okay, well, now this was something you can learn from, and he is going to ride to the top of the mount at 168 pounds and reign supreme for years and years and years as the undisputed champion. And we're all going to be saying, Canelo who? At some point? That's not going to be this kid. He's good, though. And I am interested in seeing him again against some high-ish level guys, like the dude that Magumbi that Caleb Plant just fought. That'd be a fun fight. 168 pounds. They both fought within a week. Why not? That would be, I think, a really fun fight and a really interesting test for both of those guys. I don't know who either of them are attached to. I would assume that one being on DAZN and Amazon and the other being on ESPN, just for their more recent fights, might pose a problem. But I also don't think either of them are at the point where that would be such a great hold up by any stretch of the imagination. Overall, though, I do think Munguia matured in this fight. He was comfortable falling behind to figure out what he needed to do. He assessed the situation, and he got to where he needed to be successful. This was, I think, a good kind of next start to the next act for Jaime Munguia. He kind of did what Canelo did to him and figured it out that way. I don't know if this is the best strategy going forward, but it worked for him, and it showed some maturity, and it still showed the class level that he is in talent-wise. And so I still think good things are ahead for Jaime Munguia. We go now to Riyadh season, the heavyweight championship bout, which shouldn't have been a championship bout, but it was because this sport is so broken. And I said we had some boxing guys in here in the chat this week, or on Friday, talking about, I think Joshua gets it done. It's like, man, I can't pick the guy anymore. Every time he is in these big situations, it doesn't feel great. And also, it's starting to feel a little bit kind of like it's his time for Dubois. Well, it's his time now. He gets the major upset as the plus 300 favorite with the knockout over Anthony Joshua, and he dominated this cat. His power is game-changing, and he was landing it from the word go. This is everything you want in a star-making night. It is a highlight reel that goes out everywhere. It was in front of 98,000 people at Wembley Stadium. It is a highlight against a guy who everyone knows. And now, this is another Star is Born moment, I think, for Dubois, who has had some setbacks against very good fighters, but is now ready for the payday and the fight of his life coming up against whoever wins against Usyk and Fury at the end of the year. But that is what is next for Dubois. For Joshua, he folds again. And this is overly critical, probably, but I said it last week. This is a fighter who stumbles in these moments. He had a chance to rewrite his legacy. We talked about that. Like, he is 2 wins away from all of the talk about, like, very talented, but just kind of, like, never really focused and never really got to the heights we wanted him to. And then he was the undisputed champion of the world. He had a chance to rewrite all of that. And instead, he came out with that. He did not look ready. He did not look prepared. He did not seem focused. He didn't look good at all. You just now, instead of this new chapter, you already add it to the story of the Usyk fight. You add it to the story of the Ruiz fight, where he had a time to take a step up and he tripped. This is going to be, I think, ultimately the legacy of Anthony Joshua, where if he was in an era before, and we saw, right, like he does have a big win, like the Klitschko big, right? That is, again, I don't want to re-legislate it, because that is legitimately a big win. And when you get, like, those guys were unstoppable. And so you don't want to re-legislate it. But I think instead of that being now a passing of the torch sort of a moment, it more just highlighted that he was an era too late. And he needed to be in that one beating up those guys. And instead, like, just being the cut guy in heavyweight isn't the thing anymore. You now need to actually be very good. And Anthony Joshua is, but he can't consistently put it together. And so, not to take anything away from what Dubois did, but more of this night in the immediate is about what Anthony Joshua didn't do and what he isn't, than about what Dubois did. But still, an unbelievable night for Dubois, and sets up a really good 2025 in the heavyweight division. Let's go back to the stick and ball sports now, as the Toronto Raptors, on the brink of making a very big decision. Let's talk about it. All right, so the Toronto Raptors are reportedly going to retire Vince Carter's jersey November 2nd, as Vince Carter gets set to go into the Pro Basketball Hall of Fame this year. And it leads to an interesting conversation, and one that we have had around these parts for a while. Vince Carter, it's a weird legacy with the Raptors, because as time goes on, and as, again, like you see the dude behind me, Kawhi Leonard, you know, that guy did his thing for 1 year, and all of a sudden the sins of the past are forgotten. And as you get further away from that, and as the team won playoff rounds and made it to Eastern Conference Finals, and then won a championship, as that stuff happened, the road that we took to get here, it starts to look a little bit more paved with gold than it was. And you start to see more of the highlights, and the between the legs, and the honey dip, and all of the windmill that is still one of the great dunks in the history of people dunking basketballs into rims. And you see all of that, and you forget how it ended. You just remember the good times, because that's how we're wired, and all of those things. And you forget about how frustrating it was at the end, where he was like, yeah, I'm not going to dunk anymore. And then he forces his way out in a trade that set the franchise back for years. And reputationally, I think set them back for decades, as a place that star players shouldn't go, because, well, Vince wouldn't want to be there. Like, why should we? Like, he did all these great things, and then he wanted to leave, so why would I even want to go there? Like, I think reputationally, it set them back. But also, he kept this team above water at a time where the Grizzlies were shrinking. And I get there's a documentary on it, and there's a whole lot of other things going around it, so maybe the narrative of the Raptors would have been folded if Vince Carter wasn't a thing. I do think that maybe gets overblown a little bit, but still, he made this team must see, and he made this team important. He put them on national television. He got them to within one shot in the corner in Game 7 against the Philadelphia 76ers away from making it to the NBA's Eastern Conference Finals. And so to have that go, and then turn around into, I hate this team and I want to leave, that is a little bit difficult to swallow. And when he's that important, it hurt. It really did hurt. And there's a reason why he got booed just relentlessly for like 10 years. And then eventually he just hung around long enough. It was the reverse of Harvey Dent, right? Like he you either die a villain or you live long enough to see yourself become a hero. That's kind of what happened. He just played long enough that we were just like, no, it's pretty dope though, right? Like all the, like the woo and the ba-boom and all that. Like that was pretty sweet, cool. Yeah, no, he's great. It's funny how that like time really did heal that wound. And when you see what he was able to do and how important he was to that franchise at that time, I don't see how this is a bad decision. And I understand, like, for whatever, like, that this is the first jersey that you are retiring. And so you, like, Kyle Lowry is the greatest Raptor of all time, given, like, what he did. And then, like, he got this team beyond the points that Vince was able to take them to, and then to a championship. And then his performance in the championship clinching game when he scored the first 12 points on his own is the stuff of legends and cements him. It is in pen, not pencil, that he is the greatest Raptor of all time. And yes, like romantically, it would have been best if he could have had his jersey retired first. He also started his career like a decade after Vince. And Vince Carter's going in the Hall of Fame this year. And aside from like the funny Hakeem Olajuwon thing, we don't got many of those, right? And like the Bosch, but like, yes, the timing, it would have been perfect. To like the second Kyle Lowry's jersey goes up, then all of a sudden, all right, yeah, Vince's is there too. And we just do this whole big thing. But the time, like, it doesn't have to work that way. Kyle Lowry is going to get his jersey retired. And it doesn't make it less retired if he is the second one that gets his jersey retired. If you want to build a statue for him outside, go nuts. And he can be the first statue that the Raptors have outside. And then Vince's between the legs dunk can be the second. And we can bring balance and harmony to the universe that way. There are always going to be people who view Vince negatively for how he left Toronto. And that is not an unjustified spot, given all that we just went through about how he did that. But I will say, to just ignore how important he was to this team and to ignore all that he did accomplish with this team and then to ignore what is happening with him as a basketball Hall of Famer, just so that we can wait on Kyle Lowry not playing out the string of his career, I feel like that is just trying to create a scenario that just doesn't work. That there is absolutely nothing wrong with Vince being the first jersey retired and for what he did for this Toronto Raptors franchise. So I just wanted to get that out there. Quickly, from the chat, Salt Miner Gaming, asking, what did you think of, or thoughts on Vikings, Texans? I did talk about this a little bit earlier, and so all these videos go up on youtube.com/@CouchPotatoDiary, because it's still a little clunky in that way. But, so if you want the full breakdown of that, I will, it is there, but you're here now, so, and you're asking, and I want to get the chat involved. I thought that you look at this game and you feel like the Vikings are now legit, right? Like they are moving the football very effectively. Sam Darnold, maybe he's not going to win MVP, but this is the best he has looked. And Jefferson is for real. And Aaron Jones might be the best offensive acquisition of this offseason. And what they're now able to do with a couple of really talented playmakers while they've had some other injuries and still waiting for Hawkinson to come back, it makes you feel really good that if this team can get back fully healthy, that they are going to be a very difficult one to deal with. But also, Flores is coaching the hell out of that defense. This is now a couple games in a row against offenses that people have a lot of respect for, that they have completely shut them down. And I do think there are more issues out in Houston than just they played Minnesota, but the Vikings still took advantage of that. Brian Flores is causing some real problems for teams right now, and the Vikings are absolutely, I think, legitimate in what they are doing right now in the NFL here. From the Texans standpoint, there are some concerns. Offensively, it just hasn't clicked. Aside from a game against the Indianapolis Colts, who are rather predictable defensively, and also are a team that the Texans have seen a bunch, so there's a comfort and a familiarity there. That kind of lets you unload offensively. But they struggled against the Bears, who have a good defense. And they've struggled against the Vikings, who have a good defense. But as I said before, that shouldn't be an excuse when one of your goals is Super Bowl, because you're going to have to play a good defense or two on the way to winning a championship. So this is something that needs to get figured out there. The real concern for me, though, is the defensive side of things, because we've seen now how the Colts have struggled in 2 games since that one where they kind of went off against the Texans. And now this is another game where they just couldn't stop Minnesota at all. And so I think there are questions on the defensive side that really need to be answered for the Houston Texans going forward. So it is weird to say like, oh, this team's awesome, but you guys really struggled, so you're also bad. Like it does. It feels like you should pick one, but I do think that there are some shades of gray all across the way. So hopefully that was a good summary for you, Salt Miner Gaming, and I appreciate you popping into the chat today. All right, the NHL preview continues now. Oh yeah, man, Vikings-Chiefs Super Bowl would be quite interesting, I think. I think we can wait a little bit before we start talking Vikings Super Bowl, but they've looked very good. If Jordan Love can get back for this week against the Vikings, this is a real interesting test for them. But, I mean, playoff team, for sure. Home field advantage is also very big. And we kind of saw that go away for them last year. That is something that has, I think, come back again this year. This home field feels like an advantage for them. Okay, yes, NHL preview. Every year, there are teams that pop in and out from the playoffs, right? Like I would say never do we go like, okay, yeah, all 16 from last year, just copy and paste it into this year and let's go again. That's not how it works. So who are the teams that we think are going to go in and who are the teams that we think are coming out? Let's talk some playoff teams in the NHL in our season preview today. Every year in the NHL, we have some teams that were playoff teams a year ago that find themselves on the outside looking in. And the opposite, some teams that couldn't quite get over that hump last year finally get into the 16-team dance this year. And so today, we're going to try to predict who they are. We got 5 coming out and 5 going in. Let's start with the teams that are coming out, because we need space for these new teams entering our dance. And admittedly, when you look at the name power of the out and then the name power of the in, I don't know if it's exactly what the NHL would want, but I do think that there is still some intrigue here. So let's start first with the out. And at number 5, I don't know, like, they are kind of 5 because I just needed 5. Quite frankly, because I found 5 on the in, and, lists are better when they're top 5, right? So I have Vancouver. I do think that there is a world where the goaltending situation just doesn't correct itself, right? Like, Thatcher Demko is dealing with an injury that you see the quotes out of camp, and it doesn't totally feel like they have a grasp on it, and that feels concerning to me. You combine that with, a lot went well for them last year. Like, I just can't believe that JT Miller is going to be that good again. And like Elias Pettersson was on another level for a while. And like they got some very good play from their depth forwards as well. And it felt like last year was everything is going right for Vancouver year. And so I do think that there is a opportunity for them to maybe step back a little bit. Now, stepping back a little bit for a team that finished first in their division and was within a stone's throw of the President's Trophy again, like that is a large falling off. And so this is why they're at number 5. I do think it would take a bit of catastrophe for them to fall off, or one team to be so much better than we thought they were going to be and moving into that spot. But I do think that they are a team that has the potential to fall out. At 4, it's the Los Angeles Kings. They once again got just curb stomped by the Edmonton Oilers, and they go out and acquire Pierre-Luc. No, they didn't. They got rid of Pierre-Luc Dubois. So that helps. They maybe kind of figured out the goaltending situation, so that maybe also helps. But there still feels like there's something lacking. And also, it does kind of feel like Drew Doughty is fading a little bit, and they don't really have the blue line to help make up for that. And so I just feel like there is maybe a little bit of a falling off, as like what we kind of thought there was a lot of these young pieces and you got excited about it, and they traded a few of them away for PLD, and I think that set the franchise back a little bit. Now they still made the playoffs, but now you look at kind of those younger depth pieces that are supposed to be pushing up, they're not in the way that I think they need to. Byfield looks like he could have another really good year after a great year last year, but I just don't know if there is enough there to make up for some of the other guys who are starting to fall off a little bit. And I still have some concerns about the goaltending situation. At 3, the Winnipeg Jets. Last season, everything kind of clicked for them until the playoffs. But like they were a team that legitimately I thought could win the Stanley Cup. But that was, again, with Connor Hellebuck playing like the best goalie in the world for some really long stretches and getting some very strong performances out of a few of your guys. Now this year, You have a controversy around Ehlers. There was the whole thing with the prospect who didn't want to be there. And I think that this is actually quite a good team and just kind of needed to pick some ones to fill into this spot. But when you're looking at the teams out west who have the chance to maybe fall off a little bit, there are just, quite frankly, a lot of very good teams. And I don't think Dallas falls out to the point where they're out of the playoffs. I don't think Colorado falls out to the point where they're out of the playoffs. And like Nashville got quite a bit better this year. So where else are you going to fall? And that could be a little bit of it too, is that there are just some other teams who are pushing up and making life a little bit more difficult on Winnipeg. The next two are out east, the New York Islanders. And I know, I perpetually underrate the New York Islanders. I still, for the fifth year in a row, just don't think they're good enough to make the playoffs. I like a couple of the pieces that they have, but I just don't think that they are about that life and are a team that I see really making a push into the playoffs this year. I think because there are a couple of other improving teams out east, that they kind of get knocked off here. And I think there's been a couple of times where it's felt they kind of got in a bit by default because some of these younger teams just couldn't quite get over that hump. And at number one, it's Washington. They were the ones who traded for Pierre-Luc Dubois. I have concerns about that. They go out and acquire Andrew Mangiapane. If you guys listened to any of my Flame stuff last year, you know I was not super high on the kid. And I worry that they are going to expect the 35 goal scorer that was there a couple of years ago, who's not anymore. I worry about that. And they had a goalie get hot for the first time in his career, and it got them to the playoffs. I don't know if I have confidence that happens again. And so I think Washington is the team that I do think falls out here when we get into it this season. And then the teams now that get into the playoffs. Sorry, I just got a thing on my OBS that says welcome to the chat. So hopefully I didn't miss a whole lot here. But looks like everything is going fine now. Anyway, the teams that are going into the playoffs now. At 5, it's Utah. They go out and acquire Sergachev. This was a team I thought that could make a run into the playoffs last year. And then you had the whole where are they going to live situation, and where there was just so much negativity around the arena, around being in Arizona, about potentially moving, and all of that I think it just kind of became too much of a distraction for them to overcome. I think now that they are in a new place, reinvigorated, all of that, I think that this is a team that makes the bump into the playoffs this year. At 4, it is the Minnesota Wild. I think injuries really hindered this team last year. They are now just about out of the purgatory for toxic. Yes, I did. Yes. Doing this part today, saying, oh yeah, Utah's going to make it into the playoffs after they did the own goal last night in the preseason. Yeah, it's not great. It doesn't help me all that much. And so, yeah, that's, it's mildly concerning. It's a problem. But I do think that there is a team there that can really make a push. For Minnesota now, this is a team that was hampered by injuries a lot last year. And now they are coming in, and I think that, Kaprizov is still one of the best players in the league, man. And Eriksson Ek, I think, doesn't get enough credit. They have this cap situation that's been hanging over them for a while that is coming towards an end anyway. And so I think that there is some reason for optimism out in Minnesota. At 3, it's Seattle. I didn't love what they did this offseason in terms of long-term contracts, but Montour and Stevenson make this a better hockey team than they were last year. And so I think with another year of development for some of the young guys, and now adding a couple of very good playoff-proven pieces, that this is a Seattle team that can push for the playoffs. At 2, it's Montreal. This is assuming that there is some growth in Patrick Laine, and he just kind of gets back into being the guy that he was a few years ago, and the guy we all thought he could be. But I think, my breakout player of the year this year is Cole Caulfield. Slafkovsky was on that list as well. They have all these guys who I think are these young players who can take this step into being that type of a caliber of player, and that will really help them going forward. And I think that this is a team now that takes that step, that is done rebuilding. They have a couple of pieces on the blue line that you don't mind. And I have said before, there's some advancement that needs to be done tactically and from quite a few players to get them there, but I do think that they are ready to take that next step into the postseason. And at one, it's cheating a little bit, but it's New Jersey. I thought they could have been legitimately a Stanley Cup contender last year if they would have acquired Tanev and Markstrom from the Flames. They got neither and missed the playoffs. But now they made a big move in the offseason to get a defenseman. They made a big move in the offseason to get the goalie Markstrom. This is a team that feels complete. And yeah, Hughes' injury sucks, but this is a team that feels complete right now and feels like they can make a real run, not just at a playoff spot, but a very high seed in the Eastern Conference, and then do some damage, in the postseason. All right, one last segment to go on this Marathon 1 today. Let's go now. The Calgary Flames season preview continues, looking today at the X Factors for the upcoming season. The Calgary Flames preseason kicked off last night, and just as a nice reminder that the season is rapidly approaching. And so today, going to be looking at who are the X factors for this team for the upcoming year. Also, looking at who might fall off this season for the Flames. Let's begin with the X factor. Actually, you know what? Let's start with the fall-offs so we can end on a more positive note. Also, I haven't been able to watch the game from last night yet. I plan on doing that and then doing a Flames related podcast either late today or early on tomorrow. That is the plan right now, is to get some a little bit more Flames content out there, and maybe build up the Game Over channel right now. By the way, Game Over Calgary, go subscribe to that right now. Okay, so first, the fall off. I do think that Blake Coleman is a tremendous player, and he was unbelievable last year. But some of those like point totals and everything like that were just so out of nowhere that I do worry that this is going to be someone that just kind of falls off a little bit this year. And so I think that like from a production standpoint, it's not going to be the same. And I think he is the one who has a chance, who probably falls off a little bit more here this year. At 2, I have Mackenzie Weegar. Again, put up some great numbers last year, and none of this is a statement on any of these players as players. It's a little bit just more what the production was last year. He put up some great numbers, but I do worry that may dip with some inconsistency in who his partners are and just, how math works. It's tough to put up those type of numbers again in back-to-back years. Again, he may even feel like, from just a play standpoint, that he is putting out a better product than he did last year, but the numbers may not get him there. And at 3, it's Martin Pospisil. A couple of things here. I do think that last year was a, oh, holy shit, who is this guy moment. Now teams are going to have a year of figuring him out and a year of, okay, let's see. So it'll be nice to see what his counterpunch is to that. But also, I do think he's going to bounce around the lineup quite a bit. He feels like the one who, like in the top 6, maybe even undeservedly, but maybe gets bumped from a top 6 spot to put someone else in, and he goes down to the 4th line. And I also think they're going to experiment with him at center a little bit more, and I don't think that means him in the 2nd line. And so again, this could be a year of real development for his talents. It's just maybe not going to look the same on the score sheet than it did a year ago. Now on to the X Factors. Who are the guys who are going to like really decide the year for the Calgary Flames? At 3, I have Daniil Miramanov. He showed some flashes late last year when he came in. If he can be a real guy on the blue line, that actually helps quite a bit, because one of the things we have said all season or all off season is this team has really 2 legitimate NHL defensemen, and everyone else, like, all due respect to Bean, he's a 5'6" guy or a 6'7" guy. And like I kind of view Miramanov the same way. If he can step into a more substantial role legitimately, and not just because, well, you happen to be the 3rd best guy here, but if he can legitimately be a second pairing guy, then that I think changes the shape of this Flames team actually quite a bit. And again, all of these things, like there's going to be some real, there's real chances here either way. But I will say, again, I do not think that this is going to be a team that makes the playoffs. And so even if Miramanov is awesome, I don't think that, like, we're not talking about this team being a 1 seed. We are more just talking about, like, this team showing some growth and development. On that note, at 2, it is Connor Zary. He needs to show a little bit more consistency in his game this year. If he can do that, because when it is good, It is so good. He has a real touch and a real vision out there that the old Enzo Amore thing, you can't teach that. He has some of those skills and some of those abilities that make him very, very dangerous out on the ice. Just doesn't do it all the time. And so that has led to some inconsistent play. If he can round that out and just be that guy for 82 games, then again, it changes, I think, the dynamic of this forward group. More so for the future than this year, but really, it does change things for this team. And at number 1, it's Anthony Mantha. He has always been someone who the talent has been there, and he has been a very, very exciting player. And it hasn't, like Zari, it didn't click always. And sometimes it does, even some seasons, it clicks for 82 games. But to be able to put year after year, sometimes for him, month after month, game after game, or shift after shift together, the consistency hasn't been there. And so if he can do that, it makes for some intriguing decisions around this Calgary Flames team. But also, I think his biggest thing this year is, can he get Jonathan Huberdeau? We have thrown out the idea of him being a $10.5 million player, right? We know he's probably not. Can you get him to a level that is at least acceptable? Can we get this guy to a point per game like he was flirting with at the end of last season? And if Mantha can be a guy that can get that out of Jonathan Huberdeau, A, maybe he bumps up his trade value and we help him out, or B, he's a guy who you can kind of keep around midterm, not long term, but he's a guy you can keep around for a couple of years that helps get your highest paid player to be a productive member of this NHL team. And that would be a very big thing for the Calgary Flames. Again, I don't think it's going to be an overly competitive year, but it's going to be a very interesting year with the Calgary Flames. All right, that is going to do it. Thank you all so much. Whether you are tuning in live, if you're watching this later on YouTube, or if you're listening later, wherever you get your podcasts, I greatly appreciate it. We are doing another video game stream. Because this one was late, I know the schedule says 2. I think I'm going to shift that one to 2:30. I can't go too late today because we have painters coming back here. But yeah, 2:30, we'll do another stream, and we'll do it Calgary Flames. The Flames and the WWE video game finished in a tie in the poll on Friday. So we'll be back in an hour and a half talking some more Calgary Flames and playing that game. So thank you guys. Later, Toxic. Greatly appreciate y'all. And yeah, I will talk to all of you very soon. Goodbye.